At this point, you already have the migrations for the tables and the models for the data structure and what to do with that information in the database. Now it is time to create the factories to automatically, using Faker, create different instances of users, of payments, orders, and images. So let's start with the user factory because we need to add a new attribute, which is admin size. So let's go to database, factories, and there is of course the user factory. We have the name, we have the email verified add, password, remember token, and just after the remember token, for example, we can add the admin size, which is going to be equals to something. Remember, admin size can be null, meaning that the user is not an admin, or can be a timestamp. So we are going to select a random element using, of course, Faker. Remember, this is random element on singular, not in plural. And there we are just going to select between the current time, it means using the now helper, or a null value. So randomly, any user can be admin having the current time as the admin size, or just be null, which means again it is not an admin user. That's all. Now let's continue, for example, in the case of the order factory. So let's go here, order factory. Remember, we are going to have status and we are going to take care of the customer ID in other way. So this is not needed here. Now, in the case of the status, once again, we are going to have a random element. So we have Faker, random element, there is it, and the two possible status, in fact, those are three, are pending, paid, or shipped. Of course, you can use any other status if you prefer. Doesn't matter too much, it's just a way to show how we can randomly select that any order has any of those three possible elements. So this is pending, which is in fact the default value. Then we have paid, and finally shipped. That's all. Remember, we are going to take care of the customer ID, or basically the foreign keys in general, in a following class once we understand the different relationships, how to use her, how to in fact insert relationships using the database seeder. So don't worry, be patient, we are going to be there very soon. Now let's continue with payment factory. There we are going to insert the amount and the paid at, and once again the order ID is not needed. So let's start with the amount. This is going to be using Faker, and this time is going to be, remember, amount is float, so we need a random float. There is it. Then the random float is going to be of 2 decimal position. This is basically the same as we had in the case of the product. So this is 2, the minimum value is going to be 15, for example, and the maximum value is going to be 500. Then we are going to have the paid at, and in this time we are going to assume that all of our elements are going to be paid. Every single payment is going to have a paid at. So we are going to use Faker date time between, and we are going to use something like this. The start date, remember, this is not necessary, I'm just adding this to be clear for you. This is the start date. So we are going to use, for example, -1 year from the current time. And the maximum time is going to be the current time. It means now. Be sure that we are using this between quotations, and Faker, in fact, PHP is going to take care of that for us. You can additionally specify here a time zone if you prefer, but we are going to pass that as null, just a matter of if you prefer or want to use it. Again, you can check that in the documentation of Faker to get the details of every single attribute or parameter that you have. So this is the start date, this is the end date, just to be consistent. And that's all related with the paid at and the amount for the specific payment. Once again, we don't need to take care of the order ID because we are going to work on that later once we understand their relationships. Now, the last one, but the most important, in fact, is the image factory. We already have the card factory, which is going to be empty. Remember, We don't have any other attribute. For the case of cart, we only have the ID and the timestamps, and those are automatically managed by Laravel and the database. Then we have the image factory that we are going to implement in a few, order factory, payments factory, product factory, and user factory with the new attribute. So this is going to be interesting because remember that the images can be for a product or for a user, and we are going to, let's say, differentiate the location of the images depending if it is an image for a user or an image for a product. So before to start creating images, in fact, we are not to create them. We are just going to generate automatically and randomly the path to some set of existing images. So what I'm going to do now is go to public folder of our project, and there I'm going to paste a EMG folder containing images for projects and users. Of course, don't worry, you can get this set of images from the source code of the project or even for the resources of this specific class. So, in the case of users, we are going to have only 6 images. Those are different users generated with a random web page, which is going to generate on existing users. Normally, this is not real people. This is generated with artificial intelligence. And in the case of projects, we are going to have 10 possible images take from a web page called FreePic. You can go there and take your own images if you prefer, and the same here. Now, that means that in the case of products, we are going to generate randomly a number from 1 to 10, and then we are going to link to EMG products. But in the case of users, we are going to generate a random number between 1 and 6, and we are going to link to EMG users. So there are different paths depending on the type of element that we are creating. It means if it is an image for products or an image for users. So there appears something new. We have this factory, but there appears something called states in the factory. So this is basically the same, but instead of define, we can use something called state, and we need to specify a name for this state. So let's assume that the new state is going to be user. In fact, the state name is in the second parameter here, and is going to be user. So we need to specify if we want to use a factory for image for getting a user image, or by default, which is going to be the regular factory for an image of a product. So in both cases, we are going to need the path. So this is going to be path, which is of course an array, so we can remove this here. And the value is going to be a path to EMG slash, in the first case is going to be products or images. And then we are going to have in a variable the file name, including of course the extension. So what about the file name? Well, we are going to create that here, file name, using Faker, and we are going to randomly generate a number between 1 and, in the case of products, 10, and I know in the case of images for users, 6. So let's to adapt the code. In the first scenario, we are going to generate a number between 1 and 10, and then we are going to add the extension. So we point the extension, which usually, as you can see here, all of them are JPG extensions. So we can use exactly the same extension for everyone, that JPG. So once again now, in the case of users, we only have 6 images, so the random number must be between 1 and 6. And in the case of products, we go to EMG products, and in the case of users, we go to EMG users. So basically what we are doing here is to generate routes that can be resolved to public, EMG, products, or users, followed by the randomly generated a number of the image that we have here. That's all. So this is the image factory, and remember we have 2 different states. The default state is going to generate images for a product, but the other state is going to generate images for a user. So let's go to verify everything is working properly correspondingly to these elements. So first, let's go to recreate our database using PHP artisan migrate. --seed, there is it. And finally, using Tinker, we can verify easily every one of our factories. Remember, we have a factory helper, so we can use, for example, the factory for image. So we want to create an image. This is going to be from app image, and we want to generate, for example, 5 different images. So let's use make to don't save them in the database. So there you have different. This is for projects. But if we specify the state, so we can use factory states. In this case, the state is going to be user. And if you press enter, there you have. Now you have 5 images randomly generated for users. 6, 5, 2, 3, 5, etc. So you can see how you can use the states in the case of the factories. Of course, we can verify the same in the other case. For example, for a user, so let's generate randomly 5 instances of user. So there you have name, email verified ad, and admin size. Some of them have it null and the other ones doesn't randomly, of course. Then we can verify once again the factory for order this time. Let's generate, for example, only 3 orders. There you have app order. The status can be pending or paid or shipped. Of course, you can generate as much as you prefer, and that is going to work exactly the same, or you can even generate only one, and that is going to provide you only one random instance, as you can see here. Now, and finally, we can verify the factory for payment. There you have one random payment, an order with a different amount, with a different paid ad, between the range of 1 year and the current type, as you can see here. So at this point, you can use the factory. You can use it if you prefer. Instead of make, you can use create to insert information about payments or about users, etc. But we are going to take care later in the database header to insert relationships, to insert the images for a product, the images for a user, the payment for an order, etc., etc. But before of that, and as we are going to do in the following section, we need to understand how to create the relationships between the models. How can I say that a product has many images, that a user has an image, that a user has an order, and so on? And well, that is going to be in the following section. So see you there once we have all the database structure and the models for that.